From childhood, we're told that modern physics is the peak of human intelligence. Everything is supposedly explained already. Space bends, time flows differently, gravity is geometry. Almost poetic. But there's one small problem. No one has ever seen this geometry of space, touched it, measured it directly, or clearly explained what it actually is. We're told that mass curves space, and that's why objects fall. Fine, but what exactly is curving space, and what is space? That's where things get slippery. You can't see it, you can't register it with an instrument, you can't separate it from equations. You can only calculate it. In other words, we're asked to believe in an abstraction that exists in math, not in direct experiment. Beautiful, sure, convincing, that's debatable. Relativity plays by some very strange rules. At its core are postulates, assumptions taken on faith. Why is the speed of light what it is? Why does simultaneity work this way and not another? Why does mass bend space instead of space acting on mass? The answer is always the same, because the theory says so. That's a closed loop. The theory explains the world using assumptions that can't be directly tested, and any attempt to question those assumptions is treated as ignorance. The theory validates itself, and the conversation ends there. The most convenient part of this system is its built-in defense mechanism. Ask a simple human question, and you're immediately told you just don't understand. It's very complicated. A perfect excuse. If something can't be visualized, can't be directly tested, and can't be explained in plain language, then apparently the problem isn't the theory, it's your brain. That's how physics starts to look less like science and more like a religion with equations. There's a canon. There are sacred names. There's zero tolerance for doubt. Engineers and applied scientists, people who need a mechanism, not a metaphor, are pushed aside. They're not told how something works. They're told to believe that this is just how the universe is. The core problem of modern physics is brutally simple. It took the wrong path. Instead of studying the real, material world, it ran toward abstract, descriptive mathematics and decided that if an equation looks elegant, then the problem is solved. Physics used to ask what was actually happening. Now it explains everything with phrases like curved space, time geometry, and quantum fields. Things no one has ever seen, touched, or measured directly. These aren't physical objects, they're descriptions, useful ones maybe, but disconnected from reality. At some point, a decision was made. Stop looking for mechanisms and just describe outcomes. Objects fall, space is curved, particles interact, there's a field. Why? Doesn't matter, the equation works. And yet, there was another path, simpler, more grounded, and more honest. You could treat the universe as a real material medium, dense, dynamic, turbulent, not emptiness. Not abstraction, a medium where everything is motion, where elementary particles aren't magical points, but stable vortices, toroidal whirlpools in that medium, where fields aren't mystical entities, but forms of matter in motion. This approach at least tries to explain how things work, instead of drawing geometry on paper and calling it understanding. But that path is harder. You can't hide behind equations there. You have to answer questions. And answering questions means collapsing departments, theories, grants, and reputations. If we're being honest, we still don't understand the most basic things. Take two permanent magnets, put them on a table, and they pull toward each other. Why? Magnetic field. Okay, what is it? Where is it? What is it made of? How exactly does it act? No answer, just a word. A neat one. Or radio waves. A signal travels through a vacuum, through nothing, but any wave is a vibration of something. Water, air, a string, anything. Here, emptiness. How does a wave move through nothing? The answer is physical vacuum. So, emptiness that isn't empty. Nothing that behaves like something. That's not an explanation, that's verbal magic. Electricity is the same story. We use it every day. Outlets, lights, the internet. But ask what electricity physically is, and things get vague fast. Charges, fields, potentials. What is a charge? Why does it exist? Why do like charges repel and unlike ones attract? Silence. The math works. The understanding doesn't. At this point, modern physics is pretty honest about its position. We don't need to understand why, as long as we can calculate it. In other words, we don't know what's happening, but we can describe it. That's no longer science about reality. That's cosmic accounting. Instead of admitting we don't understand the mechanism, we're handed a stack of terms: field, space, vacuum, geometry. Ask for a plain explanation, and you're told you're not ready. Very convenient. And if science hadn't turned toward abstract mathematics, but instead kept digging into the real, material nature of the world, then faster-than-light travel wouldn't be considered science fiction today. Because the speed of light is not some ultimate limit of the universe, it's a characteristic speed of a medium. Exactly the same way the speed of sound is not a limit on motion itself. It's just the speed at which waves propagate through the atmosphere. We didn't ban airplanes because the speed of sound exists. We simply learned how to fly faster than it, supersonic, and the world didn't collapse. If there is a medium, it has its own sound. And if there is an ether-like material medium filling space, then the speed of light in that medium looks exactly like the speed of sound in air. A wave limit, not an absolute prohibition. Which means you don't have to break the limit. You change the mode of motion. You don't smash through a wall. You go around it. You don't race head-on. You glide, adapt, reshape how you interact with the medium. The same way an aircraft reshapes airflow around itself. But to think this way, you first have to admit the existence of a medium. And that's exactly what modern physics is afraid of, because the moment a medium enters the picture, things suddenly start to make sense. So-called dark matter stops being invisible ghost particles and becomes properties of the medium itself, its density, structure, and dynamics. Gravitational lensing anomalies stop being mysterious too, because what's being distorted isn't abstract geometry, but the structure of the medium through which light travels. But once you admit that, the beautiful fairy tale about emptiness, pure geometry, and absolute limits falls apart, and then faster-than-light travel stops looking like fantasy and starts looking like an unsolved problem in the aerodynamics of the universe. We're often told that light interference is some kind of quantum magic, that a photon is both a particle and a wave at the same time, that it passes through two slits at once, interferes with itself, and paints a beautiful pattern on a screen. It sounds smart, almost elegant. But if you strip away the hype, it's just diffraction, a wave effect. Nothing supernatural. And this is where things get really interesting, because in the mid-2000s physicists Yves Coulter and Emmanuel Fort ran an experiment that quietly blew a hole in the idea that such behavior must be uniquely quantum. They didn't use photons, not electrons. They used tiny droplets of oil, bouncing on the surface of a vibrating bath of silicone oil. What happened was unexpected. These droplets, completely classical macroscopic objects, began to behave in ways eerily similar to quantum particles. Each droplet generated waves on the surface of the oil, and then interacted with the very waves it created. The result was a self-coupled system, particle plus wave, locked together. When sent toward barriers with slits, the droplets produced diffraction and interference-like patterns. They deviated, curved, and followed preferred trajectories. They behaved as if they were choosing paths. No quantum mysticism, no superposition, no wave function collapse. Just one simple reason: there was a medium. The silicone oil acted as the thing modern physics is deeply uncomfortable talking about. A real, material, dynamic medium capable of carrying waves. The droplet moved. The The surface wave responded, and that wave fed back into the motion of the droplet. A closed feedback loop formed. Wave plus particle. No magic required. This leads to an uncomfortable question. If a macroscopic droplet, moving on a fluid surface, can produce interference-like behavior, purely because a medium exists, why are we told that light, electrons, and photons do the same thing in empty space? Any interference is a wave, and any wave is a vibration of something. Water, air, oil. A material, medium. But when it comes to light, we're told there is no medium, only vacuum. And then, almost immediately, we're told the vacuum isn't really empty. It's physical, full of fields, fluctuations, virtual activity. In other words, there is no medium, but it behaves exactly like one. That's not an explanation. That's a linguistic workaround. The walking droplet experiment points to a simple conclusion that many prefer not to face. Wave behavior appears where there is a medium capable of storing and transmitting oscillations. Remove the medium, and the wave disappears. Leave the medium in place, and even a classical object starts to display behavior we usually label as quantum. Instead of honestly saying, maybe reality contains some kind of material medium we don't yet fully understand, modern physics prefers to say, no medium exists, the universe is just strange, convenient, no need to explain mechanisms, no need to rethink foundations, no need to touch established theories. But the droplet experiment is a loud hint. The problem isn't that the world is weird. The problem is that admitting the existence of a medium would collapse too many beautiful abstractions and force physics back into the hard work of understanding real processes, instead of writing poetry about waves traveling through nothing. It's far more reasonable to assume that something real actually exists. A material medium capable of vibrating, twisting, forming vortices, and transmitting force. Otherwise, we end up with a bizarre universe where waves travel through nothing, forces act without carriers, and space itself becomes an active player. That's a lot of miracles for a hard science. The problem isn't that physics is difficult. The problem is that it increasingly replaces understanding with terminology. And as long as that continues, we'll know how to flip the switch. But we still won't understand what we just turned on.